I'm Brody,
I'm Devon.
and today we are interviewing Stormy Buonantony. I don't know if I pronounced that right, did I?
Buonantony, super close though, but it's not your fault. It's a very hard word to say.
First, I thought it was right at first, but she was a reporter. She worked with all the way from college to NFL and or NHL and all that. Worked with the Panthers, and we were very honored to have her today as our special guest. Um, I know you talked about everything about having nerves and butterflies before games. Both of us, we were broadcasters, we still are. And I know our first game, Devin, we were very anxious and very nervous. How has your style evolved when you first started to now?
Yeah, I think that with every rep you do, you're going to be more comfortable, right? So that first time that you're on TV and the red light goes on, you're like, please just don't mess up. Please make sure the words come out of my mouth. And as you go and get more and more comfortable, the job just feels so different. And it becomes, instead of talking to a camera or talking into a void, that you're talking to a friend or a family member or something like that. And I really genuinely believe that all of that comes with practice. There are some people that are genuinely supernaturally gifted, and the moment they start, they're on a rocket ship and they're taking off and they're going to be on a national network right away. But that's so rare. It's so few and far between. I think most people are like me, where you really do have to work your way up and have a bunch of different stepping stone jobs and work in a small town to figure out, like, making your mistakes on a lower level and figuring out your voice and figuring out what you're good at and your strengths and weaknesses, and to develop that comfort over time. Even when you mentioned working with the Panthers, even when I was in that job in Charlotte, North Carolina, I still was doing stuff like once a week or twice a week. When I left that job and started working in the NHL, we're doing 80 plus games and playoff games and shows during the week and games every other day. So that repetition, I felt like I took such a major leap in my career from working with the Panthers to working in hockey just because of all those reps. So the fact that you guys are calling football games already, like, you're going to be leaps and bounds farther ahead than I was, because I didn't do sideline for my first game period until I was 23 years old. So you guys are way ahead of me.
I in our football games, our second game of the year, I had a kind of mess up where I was calling the team wrong for about half the game. I was just saying the name wrong. How do you kind of just move on from that if you do make a mess up like that?
Well, first of all, if you recognize the mistake, you can correct yourself on air. That's totally fine. And the audience is going to be understanding of that. I would like to think more often than not, because think about when you're having a conversation with your friend and you mess up a word or you lose your train of thought. That happens in day-to-day life as people. We're humans. Those mistakes happen. So of course it's going to happen on TV. You're speaking on air for, in your case, like a couple hours. Of course you're going to make a mistake. So I think, like, don't be too hard on yourself is one. If you make a mistake and you know that it was wrong, correct yourself, because you'll get more respect for that. And, like, not taking life too seriously. Like, at the end of the day, too, this isn't brain surgery that we're doing every day. We're very lucky to talk about sports and have fun that you're calling a football game. So while, yes, you want to take it seriously and do the best job you possibly can, also understand it is a football game. It's okay. Everybody's going to wake up tomorrow and be just fine if you mispronounced a name or a team.
Um, like your spark in journalism and broadcasting, it happened in college, but like was there a specific moment or experience that like really like was like the true like definition of like why you wanted to do it?
Um, I don't know. I genuinely feel like, and I know I told you the story before we came on the show, but of taking that radio television elective in college, like you referenced, and how that really changed things for me. I don't think that I felt very confident in myself that I was good at it then. And having that teacher, I think, pull me aside and say, I think you're good at this. I really think you could do something with this. that made a really big difference to me. And I think that's something I would hope for anyone, that you have that person in your corner to give you confidence when you don't have it in yourself, because that was a really big moment for me in my career, because I hadn't really found something that was mine, that I really felt like it was something I could do and wanted to do for the rest of my life. And that woman gave me that moment. And I had a few other teachers after that that kind of reinforced that for me too. But once I got into the career path, I went through, honestly, after I left my first job at the Mountain West Conference, I went through a time where I had a lot of doubt again. And I quit my job and I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina without a job, and was just trying to figure it out. And I was sending my tape of like different things that I had worked on. And I was sending it out to a bunch of networks and teams and different things. And I got a lot of rejection during that time. A lot of people said no or didn't respond to me. And that can be a hard thing to take. This is a job that's very subjective, in that everybody has their own opinions of what's good and what's bad, and if they like you or not. And a lot of people didn't like my style, and that was very hard for me to take. But then when the Carolina Panthers or ESPN sees your thing and thinks you have potential, that was another moment for me that I had when I was out there in Charlotte, that I might have gotten 100 no's, but I got 8 emails back that were positive and people that were willing to meet with me. And a few of them were very quality people that believed in me enough to give me an audition or to give me a chance. And so I would say those are kind of 2 big moments for me in my life. Was one, when I was in school and I had someone believe in me. And then 2, when I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and within the same calendar year, I had 2 coordinating producers that said I had potential enough to give me a chance. And so that meant a lot to me, and it really set the groundwork for everything that I do now.
How important was both your parents being in sports in some way or another? How important was that for you to also try to go into broadcasting sports and just try the class in the first place, and then now you're calling for these major sports games?
Sure. My parents, I'm so grateful that I have such great parents in my corner. And that they did raise me in a household where sports were a part of that. Like, that's really how I bonded and connected with my dad when I was growing up, was watching college football Saturdays and NFL on Sunday. And he played baseball, so throwing the ball in the yard with he and my brother, and going to gym where my mom was my coach in gymnastics for years. So having a within my own house a little team, and then being parts of teams in youth sports and middle school and high school and all of that, I think really shaped me into a more complete person and a better friend, and I think a better teammate as a broadcaster with my team too. So all of those things really come together. But also, being a girl, I think being in a household where, like, being in sports and playing sports and wearing hand-me-down clothes and a ball cap was cool for my family and my friends. That really helped me a lot to be comfortable in my own skin. I honestly, like, this is kind of embarrassing. I went through a time in high school where I was very embarrassed about how kind of tomboy I was and how much I loved sports. And I quit basketball and I started doing cheerleading. And there's nothing against cheerleading, but I made that transition because I wanted to be more girly and I wanted to have more girlfriends. And I always like look back on that now and think how silly I was, because sports are legitimately my life now. And I remember even my parents telling me at that time, like, trust me, this is a good thing. It's good that you're athletic. It's good that you're competitive. That's not a negative toward you at all. And now you see all these women that are like so talented in sports. And I love seeing what Caitlin Clark and people like her are doing to put women's sports on the map. But at the time, I wanted to be more girly and I felt weird about it. But so to have parents in my corner that made the thing that I thought was weird about me a positive, and that's turned into a career, is very special. And I know a lot of people don't have those types of people in their corners all the time, and I did.
Um, I know, well, we know that you've been through like everything like college and NFL and NHL. I just want to ask you, like, has there been like a certain athlete that you've like interviewed or talked to that's like been like your favorite or like the most memorable?
There's honestly so many, which is a great thing about this industry is there's so many big personalities. One of my favorite athletes ever was Marc-Andre Fleury, who retired from the NHL this year, but he was with the Vegas Golden Knights as a goalie. He's won multiple Stanley Cups when he was with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He is a prankster to no end. Like, what, it didn't matter if you were a teammate, if you were a coach, if you worked on the equipment staff, if you were a broadcaster like me, if there was an open opportunity to mess with you in some way, and always like a good-hearted way too, he was going to take that opportunity. He made interviews so fun. Even after a loss or a tough night, he would still talk to you after games when a lot of players don't want to do that. So he was definitely one of my favorites. Nate Schmidt, who actually just won a Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers like less than a month ago. He is hysterical, one of the funniest people I've ever been around or interviewed. And then in college basketball, John Calipari. I don't think this would surprise many people that the dude is a character. He is like he's going to give you gold when you're at shoot around. He'll mess with you. He even messed with me on camera during a game. And it was just so funny. It ended up being like a career moment I'll never forget during a halftime interview with this guy messing with me. So those are three that just really stand out, but there's a ton. Like I could go all day with a list of really interesting personalities.
Um, while we are talking, I was looking at all the awards and all the lanyards behind you. What kind of what's special about those? Why are they hung up and why are they on a shelf?
I love my lanyard connection so much because not only do I keep my lanyards from events, and I don't do it for all of them, but I do for a lot, I label them as well for like a specific memory or something that might have happened in a game. So I've got like my NHL one here, where this season in hockey, it was my first time that I did any national games for ESPN. And on the back of that one, I have a note about Jessica Campbell, because the first game of this NHL season, she was the first female ever to be behind the bench in an NHL game as an assistant coach. And I was the reporter for that game, and I got to tell that story. So that's a memory I want to keep forever, a historic moment. So I've got that little post-it on my credential from that game. And I worked the Rose Bowl as a sideline reporter this year. And so I have the score and the date of the Rose Bowl on that credential. And I've got a ton of them. I even have my Mountain West track and field credential because it's the first time I ever did sideline reporting for an event. It was track and field. So those are very special to me, and I'll save them for as long as possible. And then I just have like some photos of different events that I've worked. The Rose Bowl, like I mentioned, I've got some confetti from the ground of the Rose Bowl and confetti from the first national championship. I worked as an in-stadium MC. The awards are just cool because I didn't know in this line of work you can get an Emmy, like like you see for regular like television shows and stuff. I didn't know when I got into this that you can get Emmys for broadcasting too. And I've just been very fortunate to work on some crews that have won sports Emmys for like regional areas of the country, but they are legit Emmys, like the same ones that you see at the Emmy Awards on television, which is just crazy to me. So I just think they're cool. That's why they're up there.
Well, I know you talked about the Rose Bowl a lot. Is that like your favorite like sports like um not like championship, like yeah, like moment or like game that you've ever been to?
Yeah, it was. And honestly, I think maybe being told I was going to work the game might have been more emotional than actually being there for me, because it was kind of one of those big wins for you personally, right? Just to know that you're on the right track in what you're doing as a broadcaster, and that somebody thinks that you're decent enough to be put on that broadcast. And the story of that is fun because I was supposed to be working the ReliaQuest Bowl, which was Michigan and Alabama. And I was really excited to work that game. And I got the call from my boss at ESPN who said, "Hey, I'm really sorry. We're going to have to take you off the Michigan Alabama game." And I was like, "Oh no, what did I do? I thought I was in trouble. What did I do wrong?" I was freaking out. And he's like, "Because we're putting you on the Rose Bowl, which is freaking Ohio State and Oregon, and Ohio State goes on to win the national championship." So like that moment for me, especially as a West Coast kid that grew up in Las Vegas and went to California all the time. The Rose Bowl is like the game, and seeing the sunset over the stadium in Pasadena, that is just a dream I didn't know was a dream because I didn't know it would be possible to ever even be assigned that game. So that was awesome. And then I was very fortunate to be on the Ohio State sideline for that game too, because it ended up being a blowout. So I lucked out from that standpoint too. But good call. Yes, that was absolutely a career highlight for me.
And you talked about how you originally scheduled one game and then had to change to the Rose Bowl. How does your preparation, how is that kind of, I don't know how much time you had in between, but how did you prepare differently since you had to kind of change kind of suddenly?
You just drag those notes to the trash. No, honestly, great practice in the college football season in general, because not a lot of people know this, but unless you are on like a top one or two crew for Fox or for ESPN or whatever it is, you find out your assignments week to week. Those big crews, they'll have a broader perspective of what might be coming up in the next couple weeks. But for somebody like me, I will call a game on Saturday, and then Sunday morning, I'll find out my assignment for the next week. So it's always a short turnaround. It's always week to week. I find out what game I'm going to work. I book all my travel. I do my hotel. I start prepping for each roster, calling sports information directors at each school, see if they can help me get a jump on my prep. But that turnaround every week being, 5, 6 days that you have to gather all of your information and coordinate all of your interviews with players and coaches and stuff really made that transition pretty easily. Even with the fact that I hadn't covered Oregon all year long, it didn't matter because we're just so used to that like turnkey rinse and repeat type of a life every week.
So you talked about like all the prep work and all that leading up. Like when you do all your prep, does it ever get like tiring? And like what does it look like?
It does, especially in football season for me, because being a sideline reporter isn't my only job. I also host a simulcast radio and television show for a sports betting network. And so that's 2 to 3 hours a day, every weekday I do, in addition to calling games. So I have a challenge just coordinating my schedule where I need to prep for the show that I'm working that day, in addition to arranging phone calls with players, with the coaches, the head coaches and coordinators every week. I do more interviews with the players than our play-by-play and analysts do. So I have extra things that I can provide in the broadcast. And that's not even talking about prepping for those calls and interviews and then kind of taking all of that information and separating out what's going to be important. So it definitely takes a lot of work, and it takes a lack of a social life. So if any of you want to do this in the future, just be mentally prepared for that. You're going to spend a lot of alone time with your computer, just getting prepped and doing all of that stuff. And when all of your friends are hanging out on a Friday night, you're prepping for your game on Saturday morning. New Year's Eve, everybody's hanging out. But if you want to call the Rose Bowl, that's on New Year's, baby. So you're not ringing in the new year. You're trying to get some sleep, right? So take all of that into account for sure as you're going.
What specific information are you looking for when you're prepping? What is the like key things you're trying to get ready for either your games or your sports betting show?
So for games specifically, I always think it's important to like know the obvious. And what's tough about our job sometimes in this rinse and repeat, new games, new teams every week, is that you have to become an expert in a week on a couple of teams that other people have been following week in, week out, right? And so I try to lean on a lot of those people. I will reach out to if there's a team reporter at a university or the radio play-by-play person. Sports information directors are extremely helpful in gathering information. And even if a story had been told previously, I love just to find out if, hey, do you feel like this story was done justice? Is there another layer to this story you think we can follow up on? How has this changed from week 1 to week 6? So knowing the obvious and then digging a little bit deeper. I always start with the stars because you have to, and then trying to find some diamonds in the rough as you go through your prep. But a lot of that comes from other people being kind and being willing to share information. And so something that I will encourage all of you to do, if this is a path you want to continue down in college and beyond, is relationships are everything. And so I am so fortunate that over the years, I've built up a really good network. I've covered so many teams and met people on the field at certain games that they are more than willing to take my call if I get assigned their game during a given week. And that is so helpful because when I first started and I didn't have any of those relationships and I didn't have those friends in the business, you're legitimately on Google trying to find anything out there. You're searching tweets for people. You're going through players' social media to see if you can find anything interesting about their family or what they were doing in the off season. And I still do a lot of that. But it's so helpful to have like a jumping off point and knowing from people who cover the team so closely what's important to them and their fan base right away.
Throughout like all the years that you've done this, there's always like blowout games, there's like close like nail biters. Has there ever been like any intense games that you've ever been to like where like something happens or like a fight breaks out and like what happens in like the studio and what do they say to you?
Well, in hockey, there's fights all the time. It's just normal. But for some instances, yeah, on the field, that's when you're most valuable at times because yes, a camera from up top might see what happened, but we don't have microphones that are live in pregame or on a lot of these players like they do in the NFL. So I am relied upon even more to, after a fight happens, what am I seeing and hearing? Did a coach come pull a guy aside and say something? So my job instantly, when there's any chaos, becomes more valuable. And it's tough because you do need to be in the right place at the right time. I am always wearing running shoes on the sideline. I'm very impressed with people that wear heels and boots because I can't do it. I'm sprinting up and down the field to get information and track down injuries and find out what's going on. If there's a weather delay, like I'm going back to the tunnel and trying to find out what information I can from different people. So again, I think like when those things happen, my role as a sideline reporter is more valuable because what my job is to provide our viewers and audience information that the play-by-play and analyst in the booth simply don't have at their disposal. So that's a great time for me to like run around, get involved and see what I can find out. In other cases, if you have just like a ticked off head coach and he's coming in hot for a halftime interview, those can be a little bit tricky. I have had some of those moments where you just ask like, what's going on, man? Like, what are you feeling right now? The emotion is visible on your face. Why are you frustrated? And that can be a tough situation to be in at times. Not my favorite, but that's part of the job. So you just grin and bear it.
We've learned while taking this class and doing our live productions that stuff doesn't always go right, and there's always you got to be ready to pivot and stuff.
Yeah.
What have you kind of learned as a sideline reporter, just in the business about pivoting when things go wrong or don't go as planned?
Sure. And I'll start with saying this for you guys. Television is always live, right? So just because something might go wrong, you're probably still going to be on the air and you have to talk through it and you have to figure it out. And that's why I'll say to you guys, if you're ever working on something and you have multiple chances to record something, because sure, in like local news, they'll do a look live, or if you're making a package, you have a bunch of opportunities to try to record your open and tag to the package. I would say, even if you stumble, try to finish the thought, try to work your way back into it. Even if you mess up, even if it's terrible, just keep going, pretend like it's live. And that will be so valuable to you when you are on a live broadcast, because if I'm doing an open hit at a game and I lose my train of thought and I forget what I'm going to say, I can't just stop talking. You got to work your way back to it. You got to figure it out, right? So just keep going is what I would say from that standpoint. And also, like, I had a very recent experience of this working the NHL draft like 2 weeks ago, where the system that they had in place to have these general managers and coaches talk to their player after they got drafted did not work the way that they had hoped it would work. and they had some technical difficulties where the coach couldn't hear us trying to connect to them. And I'm the person that's standing there. So I have to figure it out. And so now instead of the general manager talking to this player, I have to pivot and start asking him questions. And I think that goes back to being comfortable on air and having command of content, like we talked about earlier, knowing that you're prepared in the moment, that if something goes wrong, you can figure it out on the fly and you can move on to the next thing. And so much about broadcast is like, you see such a small percentage of the preparation, especially as a sideline reporter for me. You see maybe 5% of the work that I put in during the week actually on the broadcast. Most of my work on the broadcast is off camera. I'm telling my producer that a player is getting his ankle wrapped. It's not, I don't need to do a full report on this, but get a camera so that you can see it and the play-by-play can acknowledge it when he comes back into the game. I'm telling people to get a camera on a player if he's sick, if he's whatever. So like, so much of what I do is preparation beforehand and off camera on air, but you just see this little bit of what I do. And so being prepared beforehand for any situation is going to help you. And I know like it can be annoying because it's a lot of work for very little payoff. But when these situations happen and there's a glitch or somebody else's microphone goes down and you have to carry things, you're ready because you did all of that legwork that nobody else saw.
I know in this industry it's very like tight. There's a lot of like races for jobs and like competing. Has there ever been a moment in like that you've experienced where you've had to like go up and beyond to like beat the other person to that job?
I don't think so. I know that this industry does get a rap for people being very competitive and maybe I don't know if snaky is the right way to put it, but like doing what you can to get ahead and pushing other people to the side. I'm very against that thought process. I think a rising tide lifts all boats, and if I'm getting better and we're supporting other people doing the job, like we're all just going to get better as an industry. So I'm very fortunate that I don't think I've had anybody gunning for me or my position like that. I've never really looked at somebody else and said, I want to take your job. And I don't think that's a healthy way to think about it either. There's this great quote from, I believe it was Theodore Roosevelt that said something along the lines of comparison is a thief of joy. And so if you are constantly comparing yourself to other people and saying, well, they're doing this, why am I not doing this? And I need to take over for so-and-so, it's just not a very healthy mentality to have. So I just say focus on you and make yourself better. Because too, if you're paying attention to what other people are doing, you're probably not giving your all to the project or the game that you're working on. And then that goes back to everything else we've talked about preparation, right? If you're not dialed into your preparation, that means you're not going to be your best on your game. And that means you're not going to be good enough or ready for that opportunity that that other person might have when it becomes open. So it all kind of is like cyclical and goes together. So I just think focus on you and be a good person and work hard. And that's going to serve you more than trying to be head to head with somebody else.
Um, when working and trying to get this information gathered and everything together, the industry has kind of been evolving and all new stuff. There's new ways to get information. Artificial intelligence has kind of been a new thing incorporated. How is it? Do you use it at all when you're doing prep work at all just to find information, or do you know anyone that does?
It's not honestly like a big conversation topic in like my circles of friends and colleagues right now. It's something that I think for at least for my generation, it's not to gain information or to answer questions for you, but to help like better display or present information. So when I've used like a chat GPT, for example, for something, it's more like my creative juices aren't flowing the way that I want them to. And it would be helpful to get some suggestions for a segment title or something to kind of like get me moving. And oftentimes something that a chat GPT or an AI would spit out then becomes, oh, like that's a good starting place for an idea I was already thinking of. Let's build on that. So I use it more as like a building block and a facilitator for creativity when I'm stuck more than I'm going to rely on this and I'm going to ask it how to ask questions and I'm going to ask it to tell me stats for a certain thing. That's not the way that I use it personally.
Well, Stormy, me and Devin want to thank you so much for giving your time and answering all of our questions. I know we had a lot, but we want to thank you deep down for coming out here. And Devin, do you have anything else?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just answering questions. I was very curious about how AI and stuff's been incorporated. Thank you for answering that question. But that should be all. Thank you for joining us, answering questions from the first years, answering our questions. Good luck. Hope you continue your success, and very excited to see what me and Brody are able to do with this new.
Absolutely. Devin, Brody, thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I can't wait to see where your guys' careers go. Like I said, you are way farther ahead than I was. I didn't even know what I wanted to do or be with my life when I was your age. So it's really cool that you're getting the experience that you are and you're just going to get better and better. So keep with it. Thank you guys.
Thank you.